All right, welcome to a new episode of Sixers Daily. I'm your host, Jas Kang. Before we jump into things, don't forget, subscribe to the Liberty Ballers Podcast Network. You can catch us wherever you get your fix, whether that's Apple Podcasts, Spotify, you name it, we are there. And of course, we're going to have you covered at libertyballers.com throughout the postseason for the Sixers, hoping it's a deep run. Joining me for this one, a special guest. She is the official voice of the Sixers, just completed her first season as a play-by-play announcer, Miss Kate Scott. Kate, we were talking a little bit before we started rolling here. You were working your tail off for 8-9 months.
Yep.
Now you're finally done. What is it like to have a little bit of freedom here?
Ask me in a couple more days, Jas, because I'm still not sure. But as I told you before, we just started chatting, and thanks for having me on. It's great to catch up again at the end of the season after talking at the beginning. I got my Pennsylvania driver's license today, so we're taking the adulting steps. Yes, these are really boring yet exciting things that I'm getting to deal with. So now the title and registration of the car will come next. Mentioned just locked down the house in Pennsylvania earlier this week. So yeah, making the move full time, going all in, pushing all the chips to the middle of the table. But as far as the relaxation goes, I think I'll probably know about that this summer, because still totally into it, as I'm sure you are too.
Well, it's funny. What people don't understand about us who work in sports media, the adulting aspect of our lives usually takes the back seat. So Kate getting her driver's license and closing the deal on a house, that's a big thing. That's a big thing for people like us.
Somebody this morning tweeted me, because I just, having fun with this whole journey thing, said, made it official, like I'm officially a Pennsylvania resident. And somebody tweeted, smart, wait to see if they make the playoffs and then get the driver's license.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah, that's right.
Like, that wasn't the plan, but I see you. I get it.
We don't have time for it. We're a bunch of big kids. Like I said, sports media members, we like being immature. We feel like we're 18 years old the entire journey. So good for you, Kate. You're moving on to finally becoming a full adult. We wrapped up the first season, obviously, working for NBC Sports Philly there and being the voice of the team, one of the first women to ever do so in the industry in terms of being on a full-time basis. But looking at what you saw with this team, now we're going into round one against Toronto. That's coming up on Saturday, game one. What did you learn about this Sixers team throughout the season, from the beginning where we met at training camp and kind of talked then to now, like you mentioned, game 82 in the books?
Yeah. I learned that they're really resilient because, I'm sure most of your listeners know, this was a roller coaster of a season. And I realizing that this could be what it is every season, obviously, since this is my first go round on the roller coaster. But just thinking back to the beginning of the season, where they were the first team hit with COVID. And yes, then every other team had to deal with it. But Joel was gone for 3 weeks, right? After that, Shake Milton, the guy who they said looked the best coming out of training camp of all the young guys, and he was trading off. Let's flash back to the first month of the season. He and Tyrese were trading off who was starting as the point guard, but hurts the ankle, then gets kneed in the back by Andre Drummond. Obviously, the whole Ben Simmons saga that was going on the entire first half of the season, and the fact that the guys were 2.5 out in the East going into the trade deadline, I don't know if people are giving them enough credit for that. And I don't think folks are giving Joel Embiid enough credit for that, because if I was in his shoes, having to deal with all the noise and the smoke, whatever you want to call it, about Ben, and never losing his cool in a press conference, I'm sure he wanted to say other things from time to time, but he never did. He stayed the course. And because of that, I think the team was able to get James Harden and start looking towards the future like they wanted to. So just the resiliency, the perseverance of this team, the fact that then when they got James, it hasn't been easy, right? Yes, he's an all-star and a superstar, and he's probably going to be a Hall of Famer, but to get somebody with 25 games left in the season or whatever it was, that's difficult. The other teams that they're having to go up against haven't had to deal with that. They may have gotten guys back from injury, but they haven't had to insert a completely new piece into things and kind of change their rotations up quite a bit. So I'm just really impressed with how this team has continued to lean into each other, as opposed to letting anything on the outside distract them, or injuries or COVID or the trade or anything. And the fact that here we are, and like you said, getting set to take on the Raptors on Saturday.
Yeah, and you mentioned Joel, and looking back at that stretch where you missed those 3 weeks, the team only won 3 games over that time. And realistically, I agree with you. They would be most likely the number 1 seed if Joel suits up for even half of those games that he missed. And you look at how close things were at the top of the Eastern Conference with Miami, Boston, obviously making its run over the last half of the season. The Bucks, defending champs with Giannis there. But looking at Joel, you mentioned him and what he's been able to do, led the league in scoring, first center to do that since Shaq. You've heard this before, Moses Malone, first guy since then to average 30 points a game. But you got to see him up close and personal so often this season. What impressed you most about Joel, the basketball player, getting to see him, like I said, roughly 75 times this season?
Yeah, pretty awesome, right? I guess we can start there, just how much he was available, and was actually at practice earlier today, and Tobias and Doc both talked about that. The fact that he made it a point, the fact that the past 2 seasons, last year played 51 games, the season before he played 51, and I believe this year he played 68 of the 82. And again, he missed, I think, 9 games with COVID. So imagine he would have played 7 or 8 of those at least. So just his availability, being 7'2", being 280, being a guy who moves the way he does and is so active and is diving on the floor during the regular season for loose balls. I think that was incredibly impressive. And then also just the way he plays for being a guy who's as big as he is. That's one of the things I've said in interviews. Like, I have been, for the first time, calling a lot of things because there's no Joel Embiid at the collegiate level. So even though I called men's college hoops for a while, even though I called, the Summer Olympics last year, there's only one Joel Embiid on the face of the earth, a guy who is his size and is hitting baseline fadeaways like MJ and Kobe, right? Who has the footwork of a Hakeem Olajuwon, up and underneath, and a little finger roll, who is seemingly now a fan of letting the shot clock wind down so he can just fade away behind the 3-point line, right? He's done that a couple of times. So I'm like, are you trying to get a little Steph Curry into the game too? Like, what's going on, Joel? But I think Rick Carlisle said it the other night, and you obviously listed off Shaq and Moses Malone. And I know people are saying, yeah, Kareem. But in my lifetime, because Kareem was when I was a little girl, like Rick Carlisle said, he has never seen somebody Joel's size and stature being able to play the game the way he does and make it look so rhythmic and almost like ballet, because he's so smooth in the way that he does it. So it has been an honor and a pleasure to get to witness this, to get to see him day in and day out, because it's not coming around again anytime soon. There's only one Joel Embiid. There's going to be other good players in the future, but this is a very special guy.
Yeah, I was going to say, dude, with the shot clock running down, how confident were you when he's chucking them up and he's hitting like 90% of them, it seemed like.
I know, I'm thinking I need to change my call and just get ready and maybe start screaming layup like James Harden does. One on the shot clock, Joel from 28, layup.
It's money. It was money every time. It's funny, even watching it, you were like, yeah, this is going in. You know what I mean? When there's 4 seconds left on the clock.
The one off the backboard the other day too. It was like, yeah, of course, just casually off glass. Welcome to the bench, TV timeout, no big deal.
Yeah, he was so impressive to watch. And as you mentioned, his footwork and the moves that we were seeing him do, the up and unders. And there was one hoop he had last week where basically had his guy sealed behind him, caught the ball right in front of the rim and didn't even look. It was like a Keon Clark move from the Raptors, I remember. Just turned back and laid it in. That was great to see.
It was like us on our Nerf hoops when we were little kids, right?
Yeah,
I know where it is on the door.
Yeah, that's me on like an 8-foot hoop, and difference is he's doing it on 10-foot hoop. So that's the difference. But looking at, you mentioned the Ben Simmons saga. Mm-hmm. That was obviously a big thing, going back to what happened in Game 7 of the playoffs last season against the Hawks in round 2. And we had that. I remember being at camp and, everybody was saying the right things. Well, we're going to go with the guys that we have, and that's behind us. And you mentioned that despite all of the noise, Joel, when he addressed the crowd on opening night at the home opener, said, hey, you know what? We support him. We're everybody should give him some love. And that didn't change the mind of Sixers fans, as we know. And we got through to February, but the deadline happened. You were around the team so much. You're obviously talking to people, off the record and getting to see them up close and personal. How much of an impact did that situation have on the team, in your opinion, as we went through those, 5 or 6 months until the deadline?
Yeah. It didn't have an impact, I don't think, every day. But I think we all witnessed there was waves, right? A news story would come out and then they'd have to deal with it again. And even though, again, I think they all did a wonderful job of dealing with it and not saying, blank this guy, like he obviously doesn't want to be here. None of them said the wrong thing, which I was really impressed with, because I'm sure everybody was feeling a certain kind of way. So it wasn't a daily thing, but as the trade deadline approached, almost every guy had their name mentioned in a rumor, right? Tyrese was mentioned, Matisse was mentioned, obviously Tobias was mentioned a lot, but Seth, Andre, the guys who went, they were mentioned. And you could just tell it was stressful because these guys are playing so well. They're a top 3, top 4 seed in the East at that point. And they're thinking, man, am I going to get shipped to some crappy team? Like, I bought a house here. Am I going to have to sell it? They all have, families. Like, there's so much more that goes into it that I don't think fans have to think about that often, understandably so. So I think there was just a weight and kind of a cloud. And I saw Matisse and I saw Tyrese the afternoon of the trade deadline, after the trade had been made, and just said, like, I'm really happy you guys are still here. And you could tell there was a visible, like, exhale. And they said, yeah, we're really happy we're here too. So I think there was a lot of stress that the guys were carrying. And again, they did a great job channeling it or hiding it or compartmentalizing it. But I think it was way more stressful than anybody realized. And I think everybody's glad to be past it.
Yeah, that seemed like, obviously it was the big story in the NBA throughout the season, and the fact that the Lakers stunk, you know what I mean? The national media was talking about Ben Simmons pretty much every week. And also now going back to that, the guy that they got for Ben, James Harden, one of the top 75 players of all time, former MVP. We've seen him do great things on the court, now he's in the back half of his career towards the latter stages of it. Still second in the league in assists, obviously brings a playmaking ability that the Sixers lacked without Ben on the court. But there has been some concern about his lack of burst, his lack of athleticism, finishing at the rim. I believe he's in the bottom 3 for guards with a certain amount of attempts in terms of percentage from there. Again, you got to see him up close and personal through, 25 games or so there. What were your thoughts on how Harden's fitting into the team, and where do you think he might be lacking compared to what we might have seen from years past of James Harden?
Yeah. Well, I got to be honest, I was very pleasantly surprised when he got here because I'd had no interaction with James. My interactions had been covering the Warriors and seeing him with OKC way back in the day, and covering the Warriors and seeing him with Houston. So of course it was, screw you. You're on the opponent at that point. I hate you. You're so frustrating. You get fouls that aren't fouls, right? The same thing that I'm sure most Sixers fans thought. And then he's on your team and it's like, sweet, we got him. So excited that he's here. But I think there'd been a narrative that had been created about James. And I talked about this on some broadcasts about that, a ball hog, just wants to play ISO. So I went back, as I said on the broadcast, and did my own research to see if that narrative was true or if that had kind of been created and people had repeated it so long that it became the story. And that's what he was asked to do in Houston. And he did it. And he did it really well. And they were one of the top teams in the West for a number of seasons because that's what he was doing. But if you look back to what he was doing at OKC, it was different. He was much more of a distributor who could also score. But it seemed like that was the most comfortable version of James Harden. And he said that in interviews as he was transitioning from OKC to Houston. Anyway, kind of all over the map here. But I wasn't sure if we were going to see that ISO guy who didn't want to be friendly with his teammates, who was just here real quick to see if he fit in and then check out, right, and go to the next team. And it has been the complete opposite of that. I mean, I was at his first practice with the Sixers, as mentioned there today. I'm at shoot around and practice all the time. And he seemed to fit in immediately, was cracking jokes with guys, was letting guys crack jokes at him, which, is a big part of being accepted, was always asking questions, which I always pay attention to. So they'd run through a set, defensive and offensive, and he didn't understand. Be right next to Dan Burke, right next to Dave Yeager, near Doc, just asking questions. They stopped some stuff today and he was asking questions. They were working on defensive sets, which they're going to run against Toronto, I'm sure. So that was really a positive for me, seeing that he wanted to be a part of the team, that he was completely invested. He's at practice early. He's staying late, getting up shots. So that's really great. And then I think your question about what else he needs to bring, because I think the passing, as you mentioned, has been phenomenal. And I don't think anybody on the team has played with a guy who can get them the ball, right? That's one of the things that Tobias and some of the other guys have said, that they are so open on catch and shoot buckets now that that's what they are now working on before and after practice, because he gets them so open. Same with Joel. Joel said that after the first game, like, this is amazing. I've never been so open. But the same way that we're unhappy that James isn't scoring more, he's more than happy than all of us. And that's what I try to say all the time. If fans are upset, if sports radio hosts are upset, the person who is responsible for that anger is the person who's most upset, because he knows that he can play better on offense. So I don't know if the hamstring's not 100%, can't tell you that. I can't tell you if it's just him adjusting to a new team. He has said he's not used to getting so many open catch and shoot shots, right? He's not used to swinging it and have the ball swing back to him. So he's been working on catch and shoot stuff too. But I think he wants his offense to be better. I think we all do. And if it's something that's not going to get better because it's not because of the hamstring, it's because of age, I expect him, because he is such a smart basketball player, to figure it out and just to figure out new ways to score. So I'm very excited about the postseason and hopefully the years to come with James.
Yeah, we're looking at that. And I think a lot of people, especially Sixers fans, getting the week off now, getting some time to hopefully, rehab that hamstring as much as he can in a week. I mean, it's not going to get back to, I think, 100%, but hopefully we can see kind of some big offensive performances that we saw from him, especially early on when he joined the Sixers. Looking at this team now, 51-31. People are still acting like it's doomsday. It's like, relax. They're still a pretty damn good team. As much as you look at the Raptors.
Did you guys see the Pistons and the Pacers who we just played? Because they didn't even have 30 wins.
Yeah, so. Yeah. And I was like, because it's funny, because we were talking about that on the preview pod. We're like, man, as soon as I found out they were playing the Raptors, I was kind of like, uh-oh. But then I'm like, well, the Sixers are still pretty damn good. You know what I mean? Like, don't get so doomsday, but I guess that's the way it is when you're in the Sixers world where you're expecting the worst. Looking at this series overall, the Raptors have Pascal Siakam, have Fred VanVleet, two all-star level guys, although VanVleet dealing with a little bit of injury issues and not looking as good as he was earlier in the schedule, but still a very good team, well coached with Nick Nurse, offer a ton of length and athleticism. When you're looking at the Sixers, what are the keys, in your opinion, for them to be able to get past which is going to be a very hard opponent in Toronto?
Yeah, no doubt about it. And first and foremost, the thing I've been saying is postseason is hard. So whether you face the bad matchup in the first round or the third round, you're going to have to beat hard matchups in order to win a championship, whatever the sport is. So I understand some folks wanted to face the Bulls because, Sixers were 4-0 against them versus 1-3, but bring it on, because in some ways, I think a tough first round battle can really get you prepared for the rest of the postseason. But I think, simple basketball things are going to prove the difference. Rebounding. We know how good on the offensive glass the Raptors are. We know because of their length, their athleticism, they don't have one or two guys who crash the boards. They have four, sometimes all five guys just going after it. So rebounding is going to be key. How do you do better on shutting them down, not giving them second chances? Well, you play better defense. So you're not scrambling and help defense and out of positions. So those couple of things, you got to play better defense. Got to try to step up the rebounding as much as you can. And then Sixers have not had a problem at all this season getting shots. They just need to make their shots. You can't be missing bunnies like some guys have the last couple of weeks. So, and Ala said it before our game against the Raptors, a week and a half ago, they've all blended together at this point, but they're a team that just works their tails off. And I know that sounds so 8th grade basketball, but it's so true. That's one of the reasons they're such a good offensive rebounding team, and they're so frustrating. They double and triple Joel like other teams don't. Nick Nurse is such a great coach. He throws out those junk defenses that everybody says. And I always say, well, if it works, how can you call it junk? I know it might not be one you're used to seeing. So they just got to work harder. There's been plenty of times this season where all of us groaned because a guy didn't get on the floor for a loose ball. The Raptors are going to get on the floor for every loose ball. So you got to have that mentality going into this one, that it's going to be kind of a dogfight, that you're going to have to get down and dirty. And then you're just going to have to do the simple things that I mentioned. And hopefully your big boys are making shots.
Yeah, well, I think everybody's looking forward to not only this series, but all the way across the NBA. This is the first time in years where I'm like, I don't want to miss the first round. You know what I mean? Like usually you're like, all right, whatever. I don't really care. Like, you mentioned covering the Warriors up in the Bay Area. You kind of knew it was like whoever they play in the first round, it's going to be a sweep or they're going to win 5. And we're not feeling that this season, even if like Atlanta, Charlotte, Cleveland, depending what happens with Jared Allen there, because I think Brooklyn is going to win. But looking at that, like you don't know what's going to happen this season. That's why I think the NBA playoffs, although Phoenix the clear favorite, I still think if you see a team like the Warriors, the Grizzlies in the conference finals, they can certainly beat them. Kate, I want to shift to your personal journey this season. Like I mentioned, you're the official voice of the Sixers, your first season doing it, and we did this back in September. Looking back at it now, what was one of the challenges you faced early on that you were able to overcome as the season went on in terms of just a new job and a new role and move into a new city.
Yeah, there was there was so much, circling back to how we started this pod, just talking about adulting. There was so much going on away from the court that I was trying to deal with. But at the same time, I had to keep my focus as much as I could on basketball. But just, I think, adjusting to the grind that is the NBA season, now that I've been through one, it is a lot. I mean, 3 to 4 games a week is a lot. In college, you're playing 2. So you got to do all the things that players do. You got to get your sleep. You got to drink your water. You got to stay healthy. And then, as I've said in other interviews, the pace and the athleticism, and there is no NBA any place other than the NBA. The guys are faster, they jump higher, they're more ferocious and vicious with their physicality. So just adjusting to the speed and how I wanted to call things, because I listened back at the beginning of the season and I felt like some of my calls were delayed because things were truly happening faster than they never happened before. So learning on the fly, I'd say that was the biggest challenge. And not being too hard on myself, because I'm relentlessly self-critical. That's how I got here. So not beating myself up too much and just allowing myself to grow and learn each game. And I know I'm going to continue doing that for hopefully the next number of seasons. But yeah, I think it was just kind of a culmination of all of those things. Getting used to calling them hoagies instead of sandwiches, getting used to the snow, moving my family across the country, all that good stuff. But as we've talked, Jas, like I'm so happy to be here and feeling more and more like this is my home, and that I've been working my way here for a long time. Just didn't know that this was the place, because it's feeling like home already.
Well, as I mentioned, we're talking about sports media. You go through so many different opportunities and so many jobs, and you don't know where it's going to end up. You're hopeful. And like I said, I could see just the way the smile on your face. You're obviously enjoying what you're doing here. When you look back at it, how long, like, when do you think you hit your stride? When do you think you actually got comfortable with, okay, I'm here and this is my job and my position, and I feel like, I know you always felt good about what you're doing, but in terms of you felt comfortable with where you were at, maybe with the position?
Yeah. I think probably end of January-ish, which folks are saying was one of their favorite calls of mine this season. So I think it was the last day of January when Tyrese led the shorthanded squad past Ja and the Grizzlies in overtime here, right? Because I'd been calling football with Mike Golick, which was incredible during the fall, but just added another layer of difficulty to trying to settle in, because every Thursday and Friday I was traveling somewhere to call football on the weekends. Got COVID right around Christmas, so came back from that. Family arrived in mid-January, so I think getting done with all of that and then just truly getting to focus on Sixers basketball. I think that's when I started to really relax and just be confident in myself and know that some people weren't going to like it and aren't used to this different voice and different person. But if I just continued to be myself, they would start to come around. So I'd say probably end of January, around that Grizzlies game was where it started to happen. And I think it was evident in the way then I started to call games from there on out.
Yeah, you definitely get a sense of comfort as you're going through. And as you mentioned, having your family there must have made a big difference as well. Like you feel a little bit more settled in a new city.
And like they tell you, you suck, but they still love you, which helps. So, because
exactly.
Usually just saying you suck and there's no I love you after it. It's nice to have that balance.
Well, I appreciate my mom who doesn't really use social media, but she has a Twitter account and she has like 2 followers, which are like me and my sister, but she likes every single one of my tweets. So I'm like, okay, Mom, thank you very much. Yeah, she still thinks I'm crazy and like, why don't I have a 9-to-5 bank job and all that? But I mean, that's a topic for a different day. Looking at this right now, like getting to travel with the team and being on the road all the time, what's it like to I know a lot of people who have, regular jobs like me, we're not on the road every time. What's it like to just be constantly traveling when they're on the road like that? Like, do you ever get caught up in, whoa, I need to slow down here, or I need to get some sleep? Like, how do you maintain that?
Yeah, it is. It's obviously much nicer. Oh, my dog would like to talk. Piper, do you have something to say?
Yeah, he does.
Okay. Do you want to sit down? Thank you. And if she keeps barking, we can just pause for a moment and get back to it. But it's obviously much nicer than most of us get to travel, right? There's a charter plane And then there's a bus waiting for us on the tarmac that takes us right to the hotel, and there's keys waiting, and then you go right to your room. So it reduces drag. It's incredible to get to travel with a team. But at the same time, you're working the whole time. So usually if we're getting to a city in the evening, I go right to my hotel room and I'm right back into prep, either watching a game or working on my boards, which are the things I have in front of me with a bunch of notes on them. I don't really leave the hotel very often. I usually order room service and then keep working. And then in the morning, buses are waiting outside for us to go to shoot around. And I like to be present as much as I can, because that's where, I might see a guy talking to another guy, and then all of a sudden they're making a great play in the game that night. So little moments like that help. And then back to the hotel and working on boards again, and then spending way too much time doing like hair and makeup for my 30 seconds on TV. And then sometimes right from the arena to the airplane afterwards. So it is just a lot of work. They are business trips. But I was happy. Where were we last week? Went to, I think, Indianapolis, St. Elmo's Steakhouse, shouting them out. Was the first time I think I'd actually gotten out for a meal, and it's some famous steakhouse. So I was proud of myself for getting out once in the span of the past 2.5 months.
See, that's the thing. People think you're out, like going out and doing things casual all the time. It's like, no, you don't have time for that. You know what I mean?
I'm not the one with a Sprinter van waiting outside the hotel, like, take me off to party. That is not me.
All right, let's close it out with this, Kate. Have some fun with it. What are your 3 favorite road cities to visit during your work time and during the season?
Ooh, 3 favorite road cities. Well, we didn't get to do everything just yet. I didn't get to do the Bay Area road trip, so I'm sure that'll be a fun one because I'll get to go back and see friends, because that was in November. But Chicago is a pretty great city, so that was really fun. Stay at a beautiful hotel. The LA trip was really fun because I got to see a bunch of friends who I hadn't seen in a while. And I mean, Miami's not bad. I didn't experience the South Beach nightlife, although all on others have promised to indoctrinate me the next time we go down there. But just getting some sunshine and some beautiful weather. I'd actually never been to Miami before, so that was a lot of fun. And yeah, just looking forward to experiencing more in the years to come.
Okay, honest answer, Kate. Least favorite road city.
Least favorite road city. Well, just because the city didn't know what to do with the weather at the time, and it was our very first trip. We were in Dallas. That was our first trip, I think, the beginning of February, and they had a snow and ice storm the night before. And as my Texan friends have told me, when that happens, like the entire state shuts down because they don't have the plows and stuff to deal with that. So our flight was delayed 4 or 5 hours taking off. And then when we landed, we were in buses going down iced highways, which was terrifying, to be honest. And then everything at the hotel was shut down because they couldn't get food deliveries or anything. So I was like, okay, this is the glamorous NBA life that everybody talked about. And then that was the night that the basket was crooked and we had 45 minutes in the first quarter where Al and I were just doing a game show on television because there was nothing else to do. So far Dallas is at the bottom. And also, as you know, Birds fans like to say, Dallas stinks, right? So it just makes sense.
Well, I feel like Oklahoma City will eventually hit the bottom of that list, maybe next season. Okay,
I've heard that, but I don't want to jump to any conclusions.
It's safe to jump to conclusions here. You're a Cali girl, you understand. But again, we'll leave our hate for OKC for another day. Looking at your time around the team, which player? I know you obviously enjoyed talking to most or all of them, but which one did you find the easiest to engage with, and the one who has so much personality, maybe not just in front of the cameras with the media, but personally, but behind closed doors as well?
Oh, you can't put me on the spot like this, Jas, because
that's the whole point of the podcast, right?
I know. All of them have been wonderful to me. I mean, now people are calling me Miss Kate because Tyrese in his post game, when he called me Miss Kate, I don't even remember what game that was, but that's hilarious. And anytime he sees me, he still calls me that. So we have some fun with that. You can see I'm rocking my George Niang minivan shirts, and George has been wonderful to me. Gosh. I mean, I can't single out one. Danny Green was one of the first to come say hello. DeAndre Jordan has been wonderful since he arrived. He was like, hello, how do you do? I'm DeAndre. I know who you are, dude. So everybody in the coaching staff and the training staff, and that's the really cool thing of getting to travel with the team now, is it's a little family, right? So I'm getting to know all the trainers. I'm getting to know everybody who's a part of things, and we're getting to spend moments just kind of getting to know each other as human beings, which I really appreciate. And they've all made me feel welcome, which is wonderful.
Okay, I remember back to early on in your time. I believe it was September, October. You moved to Philly. You posted a picture of the cheesesteak and a beer. So, what is your? Do you have a go-to cheesesteak spot yet?
I don't yet because I haven't been to enough of them. And I when I have my favorite, I will let you know. But like we were talking about the adulting again, I think I've only had 4 or 5, which I know is going to be pretty disappointing to people. But Jim's on South Street was the first one I went to because our producer JR at NBC Sports Philadelphia, that is his favorite. Oliver lives in Jersey, so he's brought me a few from Carmen's, which I think is on the way from Jersey to the airport. He is trying to fatten me up because again, we get food on the plane and he shows up with cheesesteak. I'm like, Oliver, what? Okay, I'll eat if I must. D'Alessandro's, I've heard I have to do that. What is it? Tony Luke's roast pork. So I have a bunch on the list. Mama's, somebody else said that. So I'm looking forward to exploring and putting on even more weight this summer. So if you have a recommendation, Jas, I'm all ears.
Well, I'm going to try some when I get there too. And it's the off season, so it's always okay to put on a little bit of weight in between,
Exactly.
right? As long as you get back into, as long as you get back to going maybe about midway through July, August, you'll be okay. We'll wrap up here, Kate. As I mentioned, you're doing great things, and especially for women in sports. And we're seeing, we saw what's happened with the NCAA tournament. They record-setting numbers with viewership, and we're seeing more people, just casual people, tuning into it and giving it a chance. But as I mentioned with you, one of the first females to ever be a play-by-play announcer on a full-time basis for an NBA team. When you're looking at this, what message do you have to young girls who might want to pursue a career in sports and look at you as kind of a leader and a trailblazer in that field?
Oh gosh, yeah, no pressure, huh? You can do this. I mean, that's the message at this point. I did not think that this was a possibility for me 20 years ago when I graduated from college. That's why I didn't call games in college. I just worked as a sports reporter and an anchor and a writer because that's what I thought my ceiling was. But hopefully I'm the proof that you can be so much more than that. Every opportunity is open to you if you work hard and you get the skills and you're kind to folks and you are qualified for the position. As I mentioned at the end of Women's History Month, at the end of March, there's over a dozen women on the Sixers staff. Joel's physical therapist, our neuromuscular therapist, our massage therapist, Doc's chief of staff. There's so many, our COO for the Sixers. There's so many women who are in positions of power with the Sixers alone, not just the NBA. So then multiply that by hundreds. And they're in their positions, not because they're women, but because they earned it, because they're qualified and people want to work with them because they're great human beings too. So if there's anything you want to do, if you want to do play-by-play, if you want to be an analyst, if you want to work behind the scenes, there's so many cool parts of this. We are, again, as I mentioned, a family. There's so many little jobs that make up the entire pie. So work hard, be kind to everybody, and know that it's going to be a roller coaster, just like the NBA season. But it sure is a blast because you might just end up working for a team that pays you to cover Joel Embiid. How crazy is that?
Yeah, you have to take a second to appreciate that. And I know one thing Sixers fans are hoping for, Kate, that the playoff run is not a roller coaster. Okay, so we're hoping for that.
But we know it's going to be because every playoff run is.
Because it's the Sixers, and we know that
exactly.
too. So
lock it down, put the weight strap down.
Yeah, they're gonna go 7 against the Raptors, and they're gonna sweep Miami somehow. It's just gonna be a crazy ride, but we'll see what happens. Kate, I want to thank you for joining us. You've done an amazing job, and it was great to kind of see you take on this role and grow into it and kick ass at it, truthfully. So we're looking forward to seeing you back behind the mic again next season.
I appreciate you, man. It was great meeting you at the beginning of the season. Great catching up now, and hopefully it's a long run for the Sixers this postseason. Thanks for having me, Jas. Go Sixers.
Well, that's what we're hoping for, Kate, because that means our downloads are going to go up. That'll do it for.
That's what it's all about.
Hey, I got to bring in the money, everybody. We got to bring in the money. That's what it's always about. But we'll wrap things up there. Again, that's Kate Scott. Thanks for joining us on this episode. We'll be back with part 2 a little bit later on. As I mentioned off the top, subscribe to Liberty Ballers Podcast Network. You can catch us wherever you get your fix, and we'll be back with part 2 with Errol Epstein coming up after a short break.